What's going on, guys? Bill Manning with Studio C41, and today I wanted to talk about a camera that I absolutely love. It has some difficulties, as you see here. I'm in the studio right now, but a lot of people stray away from this particular camera because of its sync speed, and that would be the Pentax 6.7. So let's talk about this camera and why I actually still use this in the studio. Alright, so one of the difficulties with using a Pentax 6.7 with a strobe is the 1/30th sync speed. It is incredibly slow when you're outside in daylight and you're using a flash and you're trying to overcompensate for the sunlight. So a lot of people stray away from this camera and stick to things like a leaf shutter camera like the Hasselblad that I have back there. So I'm not sure if you guys can see that over there. Anyway, so I still use the Hasselblad, but I also use the Pentax 6.7 depending on the 6.7 format that I want to go with. But the lens that I have on here is actually something that kind of is Pentax's solution to this, and this was the Pentax 6.7 leaf shutter lenses. Now the leaf shutter lenses, there are only two. There is the 90mm f2.8 LS, and then there is also the 165 f2.8. I think so. I'll put it down here. I can't remember it, but it is 165 leaf shutter lens. So how does a leaf shutter work on a traditionally focal plane shutter? Well, there's a couple actually settings on here. So on this Pentax 6.7, you actually have two modes here. You have S and U. And so U is like usual mode or normal, and then S is special mode. So when you have your camera set to usual mode, what that will happen is you have to cock the shutter right here in the front, and then you also have to cock this shutter right here. And when you fire the shutter, you'll see that the lens in here, in the leaf shutter lens, fired, as well as the camera that's in here. Now, the only caveat to that is that you have to set it to the, see if I can hide, you have to set it to less than 1/30th of a second. So what I normally do is when I do my studio shoots, I set it to 1/15th of a second, and you'll listen to the difference and watch the camera. Now, when that happens, the curtain opens up very slowly. While the curtain is open, the leaf shutter opens and closes very, very quickly before the other side of the curtain comes across and closes out. And that's how you're able to achieve a faster sync speed. So there are additional options in here, especially if you have the mirror lockup version of this. So for example, you would switch it to the special mode, right? And then essentially you would cock the shutter here as you would, get your focus in as far as what you need, right? And then for the lockup mirror mode, you hit that switch and the mirror is now flipped up, and I can't see anything here now. It's actually blacked out. Now, before you shoot, you have to put your shutter on this very kind of empty space right here, right? That's a black space in between the X and the 1/1000th shutter speed right there. And so when you do that, you saw that this nothing happened here, right? Because this is still cocked. So what we have to do now, the back curtain is now open. We now have a shutter release cable that we can stick into this lens And essentially, you have a leaf shutter that acts independently from the camera. And you could actually do double exposures that way if you wanted to. So the mirror is still locked up, the curtain is completely wide open. So in order to get it closed out, because now the shutter won't advance, you just simply turn the dial here to 1/1000th, and then you heard everything reset. And so now camera functions as normal. Those are some ways that you can get past the 1/30th sync speed. There is an additional sync port right here that allows you to sync the flashes to the lens, as well as here on the side right there to do the flash. So you can see here, now you have to be careful when you do fire this shutter. If you're going to do the double cock method where you fire cock the shutter in the front, cock the shutter in the back, and then you fire from the press of the button like that, you will have to, in order for that, it's going off right now, but let's say you're firing from the camera, right? One shot advance, right? You want to plug it into this port right here. And so when that happens, let's listen. Now you saw that the leaf shutter fired, the camera curtain fired at 1/8 of a second, and the flash fired. Now that we're covered that way, let's go back to that special mode, right? So we want to go over here, switch it from U, which is usual or normal, and you want to switch, well, so now what you want to do is you want to switch it back to special mode, stick the sync, PC sync port in the front here, right? And now we are going to set the shutter to the black space, and then shutter has been cocked on the leaf. We're going to pop the curtain in the back. We're going to fire. Now the curtain is wide open in the back. This is queued up. This is queued up. So now let me go get my shutter release cable. And listen. And there you go. So that is pretty much a very simple solution that Pentax has put together for this camera. Some people say that this lens is not as sharp as the 90mm f2.8 normal lens. There are more aperture blades. This one has, I believe, only like 5 aperture blades. So you don't get super creamy bokeh, but you are able to trade off that a little bit with a leaf shutter. All right, guys, well, that wraps it up for this quick little thing about this camera lens. I absolutely love it. It helps me out get past the sync speed issue. Honestly, when I'm in a studio like this, I have a lot of control of the light. I close out these curtains, and I still use the 1/30th sync speed. You also have control with flash duration. We're not really going to get into any of that, but let me just say that I still love using my 105 2.8 with the 1/30th sync speed, and I haven't had any issues with sharpness at that point. So don't let a slow sync speed scare you from shooting in a studio. If you do a lot of studio work, I highly recommend still considering using a focal plane shutter. All right, guys, well, that wraps up for this review, and shoot some film, dang it.